Bless you.
Bless you.
Good evening. This is the regular meeting of the Traverse City Light and Power Board for Tuesday, August 12th, 2025. Please join me in rising for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please.
Tobin,
Here.
Brennan,
Here.
Stanley,
Here.
Taylor,
Here.
Warner,
Here.
Davila, Heiberger.
Here.
Thank you. Any recusal tonight? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to the consent calendar.
Purpose of the consent calendar is to expedite business by grouping non-controversial items together to be dealt with by one board motion without discussion. Any member of the board staff or the public may ask that any item on the consent calendar be removed therefrom and placed elsewhere on the agenda for full discussion. Such requests will be automatically respected. If an item is not removed from the consent calendar, the action noted in parentheses on the agenda is approved by a single board action adopting the consent calendar.
Thank you. Would any members of the board like to pull anything from consent? Okay, would anybody from the public like to pull anything from consent? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the board for a motion.
I move that we adopt the consent calendar.
Thank you.
Support.
Thank you both. Any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, consent passes. And we're on to new business, as there's no unfinished business. And the first item is HR ad hoc.
Yeah, so tonight we are looking for new members for the HR Ad Hoc Committee to serve for the next year. So the idea is we have a much more structured approach than we have in the past for this. We try and meet quarterly and talk about topics and things that are kind of, we know are going to happen, as well as things that might come up. A little different than in the past. In the past, it was more focused on the executive director's performance review, or if we had a grievance, it was more just sporadic as needed, but now it has much more structure. So we're looking for some volunteers. So
You need three?
three, please. Yep,
And
and
then
then one
alternate?
alternate. Yep.
Okay. Raise your hands.
I think I'm currently on it, and I'm happy to continue.
Okay, there's one.
Maury, you're the alternate.
Oh, I'm the alternate. Okay.
And then John and Paul and Alicia are the three.
Okay.
Do we have any idea if Alicia's up for staying on?
She expressed to me that if the board will, desires, she's more than happy to continue on.
We desire.
Okay, that's two.
Okay. Anybody else want to be the third?
Imagine it should be you or I as the other piece of that, so,
And then one of us can be the alternate?
yeah.
All right, I'll offer and then put Paul as the alternate.
Okay.
That work for you?
Sounds great.
Okay. Okay, and then just ask for a motion to create the committee with named members, is that correct?
Yes.
There is a motion, great.
I move that the following board members be appointed to the HR Ad Hoc Committee, Alicia Mora and John Taylor, with myself as alternate.
Yep, perfect.
Support.
Thank you. Any discussion? Any public comment? Bring it back to the board for a vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, HR committee is formed. And then we're on to a Cypress Street project authorization request.
Yes. So this is a rebuild slash overhead underground conversion project. The line primarily goes through Cypress Street, which is different from the Cypress Street in the city limits. This is one outside the city limits. There's actually an unimproved road right away that runs north-south there to the back of behind Tom's and the church. So right now that line runs through that corridor and runs right between Tom's and the church all the way out to US 31. And from that point, it then splits and goes east and west to feed everyone in that general area, kind of that neighborhood in East Bay Township. What we're proposing to do is, and you can see the visual we have up there. So that's the red stuff is the existing stuff that don't plan on touching, that's existing. That little blue mark there, kind of in the alley that goes from Cypress Street all the way to Avenue E, is an existing single-phase line that we're planning to upgrade to a three-phase line to then meet that existing three-phase line we have on Avenue E. When we upgrade that, we're able to then kind of divert a lot of that load to that new spur. And actually, most of the customers on this circuit are in that neighborhood, so it's going to help their reliability because now they're not going to be fed through Munson and then back down South Avenue E. And then the green is the portion that we've targeted for underground conversion. It's kind of it's a heavily wooded area in the city limits, so we're trying to limit, obviously, future tree cutting and such, and then also it allows us to better use of the commercial type space there. And so we're just going to basically the backside, the south side of the hotel that's there at the corner of Airport Access in Munson. And so we're going to actually remove the overhead line that currently goes along the east side of the hotel and then crosses US 31. So we'll be removing that, and instead that'll be just fed from the crossing we have existing on Avenue E. So that'll get a lot of the backbone kind of infrastructure set up to then start picking away at getting rid of some of the stuff along Munson corridor. This particular portion of the corridor, because it's so tight, I mean, there's not even enough right away for like a sidewalk and that. So anytime we do work here, we have to actually give them a break in and do traffic control and such. So there's a huge added cost for just regular maintenance work that we do. On top of, it's a busy corridor, so we've had, the most pull accidents in this general area. So that leads to sometimes we're able to recover those costs with if the person is damaged vehicle enough that they can't move or they are feeling so gracious as to actually wait for the police to show up. But we have had it before where people have damaged poles and drive off, and then we don't recover any of those costs. So now we have a whole bunch of costs associated with replacing of the pole and the traffic control and all of that. So that's really the gist of the project. If anyone had any questions, anything in particular.
Yeah, great. And then obviously there's some more details in the memo, but any questions for staff? I don't have any either, so we'll entertain a motion.
I'll make the motion. I move that the Light and Power Board authorizes staff to proceed with the project, including approving project costs up to $417,141, more or less, subject to review as to substance by the executive director and as to form by general counsel.
Support.
Thank you both. Any further discussion? All right, any public comment? Bring it back to the board for a vote. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anybody opposed? All right, that passes unanimously. Thanks, Tony. And then the last item on the agenda is a discussion of our satisfaction study findings and implications for the future.
Yeah, and actually, I will turn it over to Kelly. Kelly's going to kick us off, and I may have some comments as we wrap up.
Okay.
Until end of that.
That sounds great.
Yeah.
So it's all yours, Kelly.
Okay, so here with us today is Catherine Vollmer. She's from Great Blue Research. They also did our 2021 customer survey as well. New this year, just as a kind of a side note, is we had more questions for this particular survey than we have in years past. The idea behind it was to try and kind of create a baseline to kind of compare, look at the data as we, kind of implement our new strategic plan. So that's the idea, is to kind of create that baseline with these additional questions that we had added. Catherine is going to do a condensed version of the full report, and then tomorrow morning we'll put the full report on our TCLP website. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Catherine.
Awesome.
Okay, great.
Thank you for the introduction. Is this at my height? Okay, great. Can everyone hear me okay?
You sound good.
Perfect. All right. So yeah, thank you for having me here today. We were just talking about how it's so much better when we're here in person. So I'm really excited to be here and share some really, really good findings. It's always a lot easier when the ratings are positive. So with that, we'll go ahead and get started. Really briefly, this slide just goes over the, overall project overview of this year's study. It's a customer satisfaction survey. We surveyed residential and commercial customers of TCLP. You'll see on the right the areas of investigation, of which there are many, and these are, fully covered in the full report. But really, the goal of the survey was to get a sense of where does customer satisfaction lie today in comparison with 2021 data. So you'll see on each chart, you'll see kind of darker bars that are 2025 data, and then lighter faded muted bars that are our 2021 data as a comparison point. We dive into customer service, outage management, reliability. We look into electrification, specifically electric vehicles. We look at solar, time of use rates, demand response programs, and a lot of this is included today, and much of it is in the full report as well. So here's our research methodology snapshot. So we conducted the surveys online and by phone. The goal was to see how many surveys we could get digitally and then use phone to supplement that to make sure that we had a robust enough sample size to work off of. So this year, we had 391 residential customers complete the survey in total, and then 107 commercial survey respondents. So on the residential side, that got us to a margin of error of plus or minus 4.78%, which is, in the world of marketing research, that's kind of what we're aiming for. We're always aiming for a margin of error below 5%. So we were happy to see that number be slightly below that threshold, and we can be confident about a lot of the findings that are in this report. On the commercial side, you're always going to see a larger margin of error. There's just, fewer potential commercial respondents versus a survey. So our margin of error on that side was just under plus or minus 9%. The 107 commercial respondents we have, though, I will say is a very good commercial response rate based on what we typically see. A lot of times for these types of surveys, we're usually in the ballpark of 50 to 75 responses, which is not as fun to talk about. So we were really, anytime we can see that number being over 100, that's great. We conducted this research over roughly a 6-week period, so starting in mid-April and wrapping things up right around Memorial Day in the end of May. Moving right along here, we have a respondent profile on the residential side, so just to kind of give you an idea of the demographic profile of the respondents. Looking at tenure as a customer, we had a pretty even split between, I would say newer customers, so, less than 10 years, and then customers who are longer tenured, 10 years or more. Renters versus owners, almost 80% were homeowners compared to about 20% were renters. Household size, majority were 1 or 2 person households. And then as far as the type of resident, almost 90% were permanent residents, whereas just under 10% was a seasonal home. So diving into our key study findings. First things first, overall satisfaction and trust. So again, this is where you'll see some comparison data to 2021. Really, really positive ratings when it comes to overall satisfaction on both the residential and the commercial side. Commercial customers, nearly all commercial customers that we surveyed were satisfied, 98.1%. On the residential side, it was 94.4%, both very consistent with what we saw in 2021 and consistently very high. Just to kind of put that in perspective, we do national surveys for utilities across the country as well as in Michigan, and using some of those comparison points, when we look at overall satisfaction on a national level, it's usually around 72% is kind of like a safe ballpark. Sounds like a really low number, but there's a lot of utilities across the board, various sizes. There's a lot of things that contribute to that. As you can see, you're well above the national average. You're also well above the Michigan average too, which was right around 68%. That's a pretty constant theme we saw throughout this report, but just kind of starting with overall satisfaction to paint that picture. We don't see a lot of utilities have overall satisfaction above 93%. Usually if you get into kind of like, I guess if we're going back to school, like the low A range, like a 91, 92, consider that a victory. So you're well above that as well. Also on that same note, we asked if customers feel like TCLP is a trusted community partner. That was a new question this year. The vast majority of both customer bases do agree with that. So people are overall satisfied and they really see the impact that you're making in the community as well. So affordability. This is another area where you scored well above the national average. Usually with affordability, we see ratings more in like the 60% range. obviously affordability has so many different facets that go with it, and in today's economy, it takes on a whole new meaning. So with those your ratings being over 90% of customers are satisfied with your affordability, that's really something to be proud of. It shows that A, you're providing affordable service to customers, but B, they recognize it and they know and understand what that means. It is also very important to customers, obviously, to be a low-cost provider in the state. Similar to what we saw in 2021, but over 9 out of 10 customers find that it's important that TCLP is one of the lower cost providers in the state of Michigan. So what we also saw too on the residential side is that's of increasing importance compared to what we saw 4 years ago. So it's still one of the most important characteristics, but it's even more pertinent now, again, based on the economy today, and it's becoming harder and harder for people to make ends meet, and so affordability is of just increasing importance for a lot of customers. Reliability, also an area that you're excelling in. The vast majority of both customer bases, 97%, 98% of customers find it important that you're providing reliable service. And then when we looked at the overall perception of, TCLP service being reliable, you see a lot of customers fall in that excellent bucket, which is really noteworthy. Over 3/5 of commercial customers rated your reliability as excellent. Over 7 out of 10 residential customers rated reliability as excellent. So very strong positive ratings across the board. We oftentimes will look at this metric and we'll combine the above average and the excellent scores to really show like your total positive ratings in that area. And when you do that math, you get to about 90% of commercial customers and about 95% of residential customers overall find your service to be reliable. This is an area where most public power utilities perform really well when it comes to reliability. But even then, when we look at national comparison data, reliability like across the country is around 76%. So you're still performing, 20 percentage points above that, which is, one of the cornerstones of public power. So delivering not just an affordable service, but also reliable service as well. And kind of going hand in hand with reliability is outage restoration. Obviously, another sector that's really important to a lot of customers. Over 9 out of 10 of both customer bases find timely outage responsiveness to be really, really important to them. And also strong ratings across the board here as well. I did my math on this page. On the commercial side, over 4/5 gave excellent or above average ratings. On the residential side, that number was just over 90%, 92.2%. So again, usually that go hand in hand. Usually when people perceive that you're reliable, outage response kind of goes hand in hand with that as well. Another area that most public power utilities perform well in, but again, TCLP is performing well above the national average too. So we added some questions this year to really get a sense of how customers perceive you as being an innovative provider of services, both in the energy sector as well as telecom solutions. Overall, a little over 2/3 of residential customers, right around 3/4 of commercial customers find TCLP services to be very or somewhat innovative. So a really strong place to start. We asked about the top ways that TCLP can increase customers' confidence that you're providing innovative services. And the top response was regarding fiber internet services. We did see pretty strong demand for that throughout the survey, but just expanding that high-speed fiber internet and advanced telecom services was the number one thing that people are looking for, as well as just clear communication about your future plans and infrastructure planning and things like that. So this page is looking at customer service. And so in the survey, we dive into both satisfaction with customer service representatives as well as satisfaction with all other TCLP employees as well, so we can kind of cover the entire canvas. And really, we saw pretty consistent ratings across both sectors, where we're seeing roughly 9 out of 10 customers have positive ratings for customer service, whether it's customer service or just the general employees that they've interacted with at TCLP. And the ratings were largely consistent with what we saw in 2021. We saw very slight decreases in satisfaction with customer service, but they all fell within the margin of error, which means there's always going to be a little bit of variability in the survey results. So it's not so much a significant decrease in ratings; it's just a fluctuation over time. One interesting question we added to the survey this year, as Kelly was talking about the depth of this year's survey, we wanted to get a little bit more insight into customer service. So not just looking at how satisfied we are, but what does that ease of interacting with the utility look like? Because that's obviously very important for customers. And what was interesting in this table is we found that customers are having a much easier time interacting with in-person employees over the phone, having those live interactions with representatives, where the fall off is, if there's any fall off, is in the digital interactions when it comes to going to the website and looking for information or emailing or using customer portals and things like that. That is something that's really common in the public power industry. I don't have a specific metric for it, but I've done many of these surveys before, and usually the digital interfaces are kind of where a lot of public power utilities not necessarily struggle with, but where there's room for improvement over time. As you become more innovative and meet customer needs, we see a pretty big gap a lot of times with, how important people find digital platforms to be and how satisfied they are. And it's namely with younger customers like myself that tend to have higher expectations for the platforms, and it's kind of the Amazonification of it, if you will, of Amazon and like companies have really set this high standard for what online performance looks like, and that unfortunately spans to every company that people interact with. So that is kind of the change that we are seeing. So on the note of communication, we looked at preferred methods of communication when it comes to different interactions you'd have with the utilities. So starting with emergencies and outages, predominantly all customers really want to receive this information through text messages, kind of first and foremost, followed by email notifications as well. When it comes to information about products and services, email is at the forefront, but you do have a lot of customers who are still looking for that direct mail and bill insert communication as well. So it's not to say that everything's moving in the direction of digital. There's still a lot of customers that prefer having that physical mailer. And one thing that we always caution when it comes to emails is that you're always going to see email being the number one communication method, because it's kind of like the cop-out answer of like, oh, just email me. But are you going to actually read the full email? Or are you just going to like mark it off as read and move along with your day? So it's not so much just relying on email, but finding ways to use and enhance email communication so they're actually resonating with a lot of customers, because we do find that there's a lot of customers that are really very cursory in how they're viewing emails. So also on the communication front, we looked at bill payment and app interest. So current bill payment methods, primarily using a lot of digital methods, so auto pay is pretty predominant for a lot of customers, especially on the residential side. A lot of residential customers are using the online payments through the customer portal as well, whereas on the commercial side, you do have more folks paying by mail. And then one interesting takeaway from this year's survey is interest in a smartphone app is growing. And it's not so surprising. This is the trend that we're seeing in a lot of spaces, but these are really notable increases that we saw, especially on the commercial side. There was a 20 percentage point increase in interest among commercial customers for a smartphone app. And we saw a similar increase on the residential side as well. So this is, as we see digital importance coming through, smartphone apps really do follow suit, and it's a really convenient method for interacting with the utility as well. So rates. So we added some questions this year. We wanted to see if how noticeable customers found recent rate adjustments and increases to be, again, given the economic climate today. And what we saw is about 50% of residential customers had noticed an increase in their bills over the past year. On the commercial side, it was a little bit more, about 3/5 of customers had noticed it, which makes sense. I mean, you think about residential increases are likely going to be less just based on usage compared to commercial customers. What was really interesting here is we asked if customers had made any adjustments to their bill based on those increases, and the majority of customers haven't made any changes. So while they've noticed increases, they haven't been so significant that customers have felt very compelled to shift their usage in any way. And that was both on the commercial and the residential side. On the commercial side, many said that they hadn't noticed any or hadn't made any changes, but those who had just absorbed the costs instead of passing them on to their customers. On the residential side, again, many had not noticed any changes, but if they had or hadn't made any changes, but if they had, a lot of it was changing their heating or cooling settings or reducing their energy usage. So we asked about environmental sustainability this year, and this was an area that was pretty interesting. We saw just over a third of both customer bases associate TCLP as being an environmentally sustainable organization. We saw more folks kind of in the somewhat category. So, where we saw earlier where affordability and reliability are really resonating with a lot of customers, and that's really a lot of the words that customers are associating with the utility. Environmental sustainability is sort of split between a lot of customers, and they're not necessarily drawing that connection all the time. So it is kind of an area to kind of, I know there's a lot of focuses on promoting sustainable practices for customers and everything. And so this is sort of an area to kind of focus on getting that shifting the customer mindset, but encouraging customers to really think of TCLP as being that leader in this space as well as just providing reliable power. So the next couple pages look more specifically at TCLP's programs. So we asked about overall awareness of variety of different programs that TCLP offers for residential customers on this page. And awareness was actually pretty high of a lot of these programs. Usually when we asked about awareness of programs, the numbers might shock you as far as how many customers are actually aware of them. Usually it's closer to like 20 or 30%. So when you see numbers in like the 40s and 50s, that's really great. There's obviously still room to improve that, but there's still pretty strong awareness. The bigger, thought here is that while you still have high awareness of a lot of these programs, there's a lot of customers that aren't using them. So we saw on the residential side, over 7 out of 10 haven't used these programs, but many of them are aware of them. To some degree, maybe they need a little bit more education about, how this might be useful for them, if they qualify for the program, things like that. So like one example of that is with, energy efficient lighting and equipment. A lot of folks are aware that these programs are out there and they're offered through TCLP, but only 8% of customers have actually participated. And that's something that I would guess the vast majority of customers would qualify for. The lowest awareness was of the on-bill financing program. On the commercial side, a pretty similar story. We had about 3/4 of commercial customers haven't participated in any of these programs before. Again, the awareness was highest when it comes to the incentives for efficient lighting and equipment. But again, usage was even lower. Less than 6% of commercial customers have invested in that. So again, you do still see this kind of big gap between awareness of programs and actual use of them. So we looked at motivation to participate in programs. These were some questions I was really excited that we were asking about, because a lot of times with our surveys, we'll kind of ask about programs and everything and sort of leave it at that. This gets a little bit more into the behavior of customers and what's really, driving their participation in programs. And both on the residential and commercial side, the biggest factor is cost savings. And that should be no surprise. Obviously, it's very important to a lot of customers, and if they can find a program that'll help them save money, that's a win. As well as the availability of rebates or incentives, which again is really going into cost savings as well. Folks are looking for more education and information and communication on programs. So kind of going back to the last slide, or last couple of slides, where we see awareness being pretty high, there's probably a lot that could be done as far as communication about the specifics surrounding the program, so that more customers are aware of, again, how they can qualify for them, the benefits of them, instead of just saying, I know that TCLP has these programs, but I don't really know the details behind them. So electric vehicles. So about 3/5 of customers don't plan on purchasing electric vehicles in the future. I'd expect those numbers to shift a little bit over time, and especially as we start to survey more younger customers, that trend will likely be shifting. But we did see that almost 20% of customers have plans to purchase an electric vehicle at some point beyond the next 3 years. So we kind of looked at this in different time increments, whereas there's a smaller segment of customers that are really thinking about purchasing one within the next 3 years. And 7.7% already have electric vehicles. So on the note of electric technologies, we asked about drivers and barriers to switching to electric technologies. And again, so much of this is really surrounding costs as well. I don't usually like to start with barriers, but I'm going to start with the barriers on the right. The top barrier to switching to more electric technologies is the high upfront costs. A lot of customers can't afford that at this point. There's also a hesitation to switch to technologies that you're not familiar with. And I think the other thing to consider when it comes to barriers to electric technologies is so many of these are investments that customers might not plan on making immediately, and they might be thinking about them down the road. But when you look at things like heat pumps, for example, customers aren't necessarily going to just buy a heat pump if they don't need one. So the time will come for it, and customers will likely do more research into it before then. When it comes to the drivers, they are, again, surrounding costs. So, the high upfront costs are a barrier. However, customers see things like financial incentives to be a driver of purchasing, more of these electric technologies because it'll help reduce that cost, as well as having lower long-term operating costs. So time of use rates. We had a lot more questions in the survey about time of use rates than I'm going to share with you all today, but this is to kind of summarize pretty succinctly how customers feel about time of use rates. Awareness of time of use rates was actually really high. We, again, asked this question in our surveys nationally as well, and usually awareness is around 40%. It's a concept that a lot of utilities haven't done a great job communicating to their customers about, and what we often find is that customers don't have an accurate perception of what time of use rates are and how they, you don't just automatically save money, you have to actually change how you're using energy. And so, awareness was really high here, which is great. And then we asked about their preferred time of use rate structure. And what we saw is that more of the residential customers were interested in the Eco Champion option, whereas more of the commercial customers were interested in the Eco Steady option, which again makes sense based on the overall usage. It's a lot easier for residential customers to shift their usage. So having that kind of bigger difference between rates on peak and off peak won't necessarily impact them as much as it would a commercial customer. We did, however, have a lot of folks that were in the don't know, unsure camp, which just shows, again, while there's awareness, there's still more education needed to kind of show, okay, what do these rate structures really mean? We did have descriptions of each of these in the survey, so we didn't expect customers to just know what Eco Champion means or Eco Steady means. But even so, there's still room for education. Demand response. So again, we had a description of what a demand response program looks like. Roughly 30% of customers on the residential side were willing to participate in a demand response program with TCLP. However, we did have over a third that were not at all willing to do so. These numbers are not that starkly different from what we see in a lot of our surveys. Customers have a really hard time envisioning their utility having control over their appliances, and they're oftentimes not willing to give them up. As a quick little anecdote, I did a study specifically about demand response programs down in North Carolina, and customers were very misinformed about what the program would mean. A lot of our feedback was like, yeah, the program's great, except I hate the fact that my utility can change my my thermostat settings. I'm like, that's the entire program actually, so you don't like the program. So again, education is needed, but it is something that a lot of customers across the country aren't necessarily interested in, for the most part. And then wrapping things up with fiber. As I alluded to earlier, a lot of customers are very interested in fiber. We saw it in a lot of the open-ended questions as well. Overall interest in switching to TCLP's fiber internet service is really high. Around 3/5 of both customer bases are interested. The top reasons largely had to do with dissatisfaction with their current providers. So whether it was the cost of the service or just the overall reliability wasn't there, that's why a lot of customers were thinking about or were interested in switching. And the top reasons for not being interested, conversely, were customers who don't have any issues with their current internet provider. So they're happy with their current provider. There's no issues with the internet speed or reliability. We've done a lot of surveys in the fiber space, and we're doing more of them now. And one thing that we see time and time again is that customers sometimes have a holdup when it comes to switching internet providers because they're worried that they're going to lose speed. That is such a key factor, and honestly, since COVID happened and people were working remotely, it became even more pertinent. We see it a lot with public power utilities that also offer fiber, and there's this hesitation to switch because they're comfortable with what they're currently getting, even if the cost is higher. So much of it is not just showing, okay, we're the lower cost option, but we also provide reliable service and speed. And sometimes there's like a misperception about the speed when you're switching from like a bigger provider to a smaller provider. So wrapping things up with considerations, and this is where, we just kind of take the findings and we give a couple of different, actionable recommendations as food for thought. So, one thing I talked about earlier was the, digital platforms and communication. This is, to be perfectly honest, a consideration that we, offer up to a lot of different utilities because, like I mentioned, there's a lot of, there's, increased higher expectations of what digital platforms look like nowadays. So, again, as we noticed earlier in the survey, the ease of use with the website and digital communications was one of the lower ratings. So, some of our recommendations were looking at, how to kind of revamp the customer portal and website to make sure that higher traffic items where customers are going to are really easy to use. One thing that's not in here, but is something that, we've done for some utilities is, what we call like a UX test, like a user experience test. So we kind of run through any kind of you can do it with like a mobile app, you can do it with a website, and just kind of run through and recruit a couple of customers as participants for us, and see if they're able to navigate, and you kind of give them like tasks to do and say, hey, can you find this? And you kind of roughly time them to see how long it takes them, or sometimes they just give up and get too frustrated, and then and so that's always something that's really interesting to kind of look at how to improve those platforms, because you can really see what are the customer pain points and what are the holdups. And then lastly was focusing on ways to improve not just program awareness, but also participation in the programs. Awareness is pretty high, but there's definitely room to educate customers so they know, the full details behind each of these programs. But, kind of educational campaigns that are really driving some of the programs with lower awareness, but also some of the programs with lower participation can be really helpful, as well as segmented marketing content that kind of focuses on different subsets of customers that might be more likely to participate in particular programs. We find especially segmented outreach at younger customers can be really effective because a lot of times it's younger customers that are really interested in energy efficiency offerings. So sort of segmenting the communications that way can really optimize them as well. And that takes us through to the end. This is the team at Great Blue who all had a hand in this year's survey. But I'm happy to take any questions that you have at this point.
Great, thank you. Do you want to make comments now or after I do some question and answer?
Why don't you do your questions?
Okay.
Because that might help guide my comments.
Sounds good. You heard the lady. Questions? Comments? Either?
Yeah, I don't have a question, but I just want to say that I thought it was a really great survey. When I was reading through it, and got to the innovation part, and then I thought those numbers were a little bit lower, and I thought, we should have asked, how could we improve that? And then I looked to the right, and it's like, well, they did. It just seemed like the questions were really pertinent, and it was really well done. So appreciate, that.
Great.
Kudos to everyone.
Anything else?
One question on the population that got surveyed. There was, a couple places where I think like 15% of people that replied about internet, already having internet service from TCLP. Does that match our overall population that, how many customers actually have internet service from us? There was the breakdown of full-time resident versus vacation homes. Is it like 10%? Does that actually match what is in
the total?
In the total around? So I don't think that I don't expect there's a big, huge difference there, but I'm wondering how those things track to some of the actual numbers.
Yeah, it's a great question. I'm not sure off the top of my head.
Okay.
You can share that up, yeah.
Yeah. Thanks.
Okay. Tim?
Yeah, it's similar vein as far as how information here tracks with TCLP's experience. It's on the outage responsiveness and specifically the commercial customers. The drop off in the excellent rating from commercial customers, and yet I'm guessing that our responsiveness, if anything, is probably slightly improved over this time period. So is it really expectations? Commercial customers have higher expectations. And so, again, something for you to look into.
One thing I will say about that question too is some of it is like the way it's worded, and one thing we see a lot of times with outage questions is if you haven't had an outage in recent memory, sometimes you're likely to give more of like a neutral response. So you might, instead of saying excellent, you might say above average, which is still great, or average, because you can't necessarily recall the last experience. We tend to find too that when people have if people don't have recent experiences with an outage, that's great. But if they don't, sometimes they go back to like the most negative experience that they had, because those tend to be top of mind, unfortunately. So that's where you sometimes get a little bit more neutral, because it's not like someone who, okay, my last outage was 5 years ago. I'm not going to give negative ratings because I had a bad outage 5 years ago, but maybe I'm like neutral because I don't really know what the responsiveness is like because it hasn't happened recently. So that's the other kind of caveat that sometimes skews those numbers a little bit. But that's also something we can look at for, the next survey is how do we start to make sure we're only asking that to like people who have had a recent outage.
Thank you.
More accurate.
Anything else for now? I got a couple.
Yeah.
Suggestions, really, observations,
Yeah.
more than questions. The idea of having an app. I guess what I'm going to go to is before going down that path, which has all kinds of pros, pitfalls that await us to do it and do it well, maintain it, is testing which of these channels, how we want to increase our ability to be successful through each of the channels before we invest in something that will be significant to manage and to do well at. In other words, how do we build off this research to figure out, all right, what if we did need to not just get better scores, but what if we had a crisis, an actual emergency, or a peak demand situation that could affect reliability, but that's not an emergency, but it would feel like one. It'd be nice to know, having tested some messages and some techniques, if the app is necessary. And it might be. But I also wonder if you stuck on, 3 or 4 electric billboards in town. Hey, our peak demand is 4 to 6 today. See what you can do, and start to measure and pilot some of these different avenues, so that we can decide if you're going to go down the path of an app, that your confidence can actually enhance engagement, not just make a few young people feel slightly better engaged. So think about, what if we had a real problem, and we had to get the word out now? How would you do it? And this, I think, sets a good groundwork for assessing that, but there's like additional tests, I think. And then obviously, if you're prepared for the worst thing, then you're ready for all the other good stuff you want to do just in day-to-day operations. And maybe that does take us down the path of an app. Separate but related comment was co-op advertising. So if we want to get, the awareness wasn't bad, but if you want to get people to think about buying a fancy heat pump or a new washing machine or a new water heater, et cetera, it'd be great if we had partners in the community who actually sell those things, which we've already talked about in the past, but specifically using this data, say, we think we could get to our customers better if we use these channels in new ways. Hey, Team Bob's or Precision or whomever else, it's open. You want to put in some, we'll put in some. We're going to make a big push this fall. Before your heating season hits, when you're kind of in this lull, let's make a push. And so, different from a crisis or just good engagement, rather promoting our programs, maybe you take this data to some of our trade allies and say, would you be interested in working with us? They might bring some of their own data, and then you share the cost and learn more about what channels actually work to engage customers. So I think, but the whole point of that, without this bedrock, I wouldn't have the ability to say those things. So I think it's rock solid start point.
Yeah, and kind of touching on what you said earlier about the smartphone app and like testing messages, the other thing you could test too is not just, hey, do these messages go out and do they, do people actually shift their usage during those, peak demand times, for example, but you can also do like message testing in like survey formats too. So we could always say like, do you remember seeing this message? Yes. And a lot of times you might have a perception that, oh, well, it went to everyone, so they should have seen it. But then you always have a drop off of like, okay, yeah, I saw it. Then did you do anything about it?
Yes.
That's the next level. So you can kind of have that like familiarity assessment as well.
Yeah.
But if people like getting information via text, which it seemed like that's what people like to do, couldn't we just start by having some really thoughtful text messages that are used in a way that's sort of for emergency, but also for opportunities that right now you could be helping this moment in time by doing these 3 things, or just like something that's more just a way to communicate in the moment.
Definitely.
But not overuse it.
And then if you did need it, you'd have we tried that. Like, I don't know when our peak, let's just say our peak was gonna be next week. Just see, hey, heads up, text message, I don't wanna flood them with spam, but did you know that we're anticipating next Tuesday's our peak? If you can do anything you can, and then measure what happens, we have smart
Yep.
meters. And then you know if we actually get into a situation, well, even on that, like, we gave them a week's notice, and we still got 4%, what if we get 10%? That'd be huge. So, but I think, Ms. Tobin got it right, that you use that respectfully and sparingly, because you don't want to start flooding them, but there's an opportunity here to go further, it feels like.
Definitely, yeah.
Anybody else?
And that's the great thing about all of this. I feel like there is a lot of opportunity that's pretty clear about how things can change, and it feels productive. Like, all right, some things to work on.
And it's the bonus too of like, as we said, it was a longer survey, and so that does affect response rate sometimes. But personally, I'd rather have a longer survey that answers all of the questions. And there's nothing worse than doing a whole survey and being like, we should have asked this, we should have asked that. And then you have to wait until the next survey to fill them in. Hopefully you remember to fill them in. And it's different than, when, we've done some surveys where we get like thousands of responses, but it's a 10-question survey. And what is that really telling you? Okay, people are satisfied. Or conversely, it tells you people aren't satisfied, but we don't know why. We can't do anything about it. So that is kind of the bonus of having a longer survey. And we did have to make some change. On the digital survey, it did work really well, but for the phone survey, we did notice after a couple days of calling, there were a lot of customers that were like, I've been on the phone for like 20 minutes. And you never know, too, with some customers, there's open-ended responses in there, too. So it depends how wordy people choose to be. Filling the survey out. The digital survey, the longer format, does work better because we have a save and continue function, so you can like start taking it, and if you need to drop off and pick it up later, great. You can also kind of control the pace that you're taking the survey better when you're just the one filling it out. Phone surveys, obviously our researchers, they tend to read it slower to make sure that you understand it, but sometimes customers get kind of like, okay, let's go, let's finish the survey. So we did end up opting for a shorter instrument that still covered a lot of really the key metrics that I shared with you all today for the phone, just to make sure that we weren't ticking off customers either. We never want to do that.
But just a follow-up question to that, will we have access to some of those answers to the open-ended questions?
Yeah. If I haven't already, we have a verbatim open-ended document that we can share that's like in Excel, and you can just see for each tab.
Oh, yeah, I'd love that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great. All right, I think it's your turn.
Yeah, so the only thing I think I would just piggyback on is I think the observations you've made are the observations that I have as well as we have. In essence, there's a lot of data here. I will have to admit I was a little anxious going into the survey because I knew it was definitely longer. And actually, I got a customer called and like read me out over it, and of which the key point was it's not a quick survey, Brandy. It's a longer survey. So we tweaked the website a little bit, and to Catherine's point, we modified it. But what I was really happy about with the results is, quite frankly, over the past few years, we've had a lot of changes. We have a new customer service center. We've had new employees. We've got new programs. There are a lot of moving parts, but yet the customers still have confidence and our ability to meet their needs. And then most of the questions and a lot of the data, it's feeding into the customer gap assessment. So just as a reminder, that is going on right now as well. So Brio is off and running. They have this information. We'll make it available. But quite frankly, when the team and I were meeting last week, we just started roundtabling on different pieces we want to dive deeper into, like the technology engagement. What's going on with the website? Are there some opportunities there? Are there some opportunities with the texting? To your point, really sorting through how far do we get to an app? And so I really love the fact that we have more questions, if anything, and more things that we can dive into. A little bit longer of a survey, but definitely something that I think we walked away with. Feeling still good. The customers still have confidence in our ability to meet their needs. To me, and then they're giving us some grace to show up and then be able to also give you some data points to make certain we're aligning with our strategic plan. The lengthier part of the package will definitely make available. I think it's just maybe some additional slides and some additional details. It is not content-wise different than what you already have received. But as you do see that, if you do have additional questions between now and forever, as always, you can always follow up. So this isn't the last time to say, hey, I saw this, I'm looking at this again. Can you give me some more thoughts or feedback, or here are some ideas? So just kind of keep that in mind. It's kind of a ongoing journey of where we are. And then we'll still do another survey, is it like every 3 to 5 years, Kelly? Yeah, so then, and hopefully we'll be able to kind of circle back and see if we've made some movement on some key areas.
Great. Okay, last call for any comments on this topic. All right, I agree.
And I'll
it's
just
great.
add to that too, if there's any follow-up like data requests or anything, we don't throw anything away on our end. So if you wanted to look and see like, hey, what does this age group look like compared to this one? We're happy to do that, no extra charge or anything. Just, I mean, I would say reach out to anyone on this list, but probably just reach out to me. It would be safer.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank
Awesome.
you.
Well done.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, we are, is there anything else from staff? I don't see anything. Anything from the board anyone wants to share? Seeing none, we'll go to public comment, which I know, but I still have to respect the possibilities, so. Seeing no public comment, we will adjourn the meeting. Thank you all.